I'm Stephanie Mitchell, 42, and my perfect 15-year marriage to James ended when I caught him with his secretary in our bed. During our divorce, his greed knew no bounds as he tried to take everything: our house, investments, even my car. What James didn't know was that my early tech investments had grown into billions, secured in accounts he never discovered. I watched him smile triumphantly in court, thinking he'd left me with nothing. But James had no idea what was coming. Before I share how financial intelligence became my ultimate revenge, let me know where you're watching from. Hit like and subscribe to see how I went from devastated divorcee to empowered billionaire. James and I met at a tech conference in San Francisco back in 2005, during which he whisked me away to romantic weekends in Napa Valley and surprised me with thoughtful gifts that showed he paid attention to my interests. Our wedding was the talk of our social circle, a lavish affair at the Fairmont with over 300 guests, many of whom were James's important clients and partners. I remember feeling like I was living a fairy tale as we exchanged vows overlooking the San Francisco Bay. My parents, both educators from Michigan, looked somewhat out of place among the wealthy elite James had invited, but they were thrilled that I had found someone who appeared to value my intelligence and ambition. After honeymooning in the Maldives, we settled into our newly purchased dream home in Pacific Heights, a historic Victorian that James insisted we needed to maintain the right image for his career advancement. At the time, I found his focus on appearances charming, a sign of his ambition. "This house represents our future, Steph," he said as we toasted champagne in our empty living room the day we got the keys. "From here, we'll build an empire together." As James climbed the ranks at Wainwright and Sullivan, eventually making junior partner, our social calendar filled with charity galas, country club dinners, and weekend getaways with his colleagues, I continued building my career. Initially working for a major tech firm before starting my own consulting business focusing on emerging technologies. It was during these early years that I first noticed James's controlling behavior with our finances. He insisted on managing all our accounts, claiming his expertise as a corporate attorney made him better equipped to handle our growing wealth. "Trust me, Steph," he would say whenever I asked questions. "This is what I do professionally. I'm protecting our future." When my grandmother passed away in 2009, leaving me an inheritance of $250,000, James immediately suggested I transfer it to our joint investment account. For the first time, I pushed back. "I'd like to manage this money myself," I told him. "I want to invest it in some emerging tech areas I've been researching." We had our first major fight that night. James couldn't understand why I wouldn't let him handle the money, for our mutual benefit. Eventually he relented, though not without making me feel selfish for keeping these funds separate. That inheritance became my first independent investment account. With my tech background, I invested $10,000 of my inheritance into Bitcoin in 2010, when each coin cost less than $1. "You're throwing money away on internet monopoly money," James laughed when I vaguely mentioned my interest in cryptocurrency. His dismissal only strengthened my resolve to keep these investments private. As the years passed, our marriage settled into a comfortable routine. James worked long hours, often not coming home until after I'd gone to bed. I poured myself into my consulting business, which was flourishing as more companies sought expertise in navigating the rapidly evolving tech landscape. We maintained the perfect image: successful power couple, beautiful home, exotic vacations documented meticulously on social media. But beneath the surface, emotional distance was growing. Conversations became transactional, focusing on schedules and social obligations rather than dreams or feelings. Intimacy dwindled, replaced by perfunctory affection performed mainly when in public. I told myself this was normal for a maturing relationship, that passion naturally evolved into partnership. Meanwhile, James became increasingly fixated on status symbols, insisting on a new Porsche, membership to the most exclusive country club in the area, designer suits, and watches that cost more than most people's cars. I didn't object. My own business was thriving, and I continued making my own silent investments, regularly adding to my cryptocurrency holdings during market dips, diversifying into Ethereum and other promising technologies. "We need to put more assets in my name," James announced one evening in 2015. "For tax purposes." My firm's accounting team says we could save thousands annually with some strategic restructuring. Trusting his expertise, I agreed to put our house and several of our larger investment accounts solely in his name. On paper, it appeared that James controlled the vast majority of our wealth, while I maintained only a modest personal account and my business assets. My growing crypto fortune remained completely off his radar, secured through cold storage wallets and later through a complex offshore structure recommended by a financial advisor I consulted independently. Little did I know that these financial decisions would prove critically important in the years to come, as the foundation of my marriage was about to crumble in the most painful way imaginable. The day everything changed started like any other. I was returning early from a 3-day business trip to Seattle, where I'd been consulting for a major tech firm on their data security protocols. My flight had been scheduled for the evening, but we'd wrapped up ahead of schedule, allowing me to catch an earlier flight home. I hadn't told James. I thought I might surprise him with dinner from our favorite Italian restaurant. The Uber dropped me off at our Pacific Heights home around 2 p.m. I noticed James's Porsche in the driveway, which was unusual for a Wednesday afternoon. He rarely came home before 7 p.m. on weekdays. I assumed he might be working from home or perhaps wasn't feeling well. As I unlocked the front door, I heard music playing upstairs, our bedroom. I set my suitcase down quietly in the foyer, smiling at the thought of surprising him. Maybe we could even have a rare weekday afternoon together. The bedroom door was partially open. I pushed it gently, the words, "Hey, I'm home early," dying on my lips as I took in the scene before me. James was in our bed, the bed we'd shared for 15 years, with his secretary Megan. The one he'd mentioned was exceptionally competent on multiple occasions. They didn't notice me at first. It took a few seconds for my presence to register. When it did, James didn't look shocked or even particularly embarrassed. Instead, he looked annoyed at the interruption. "You're supposed to be in Seattle until tonight," he said flatly, as Megan scrambled to cover herself with our Egyptian cotton sheets. Sheets I had carefully selected for our anniversary 2 years earlier. "Obviously," I replied, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. "How long has this been going on?" James sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Does it matter? We haven't been connecting for years, Stephanie. You're always wrapped up in your little tech projects. What did you expect?" His callousness stunned me more than the infidelity itself. 15 years together, and this was his response? No apology. No shame, just blame. "Get out," I told Megan, who was gathering her clothes with trembling hands. "Now." After she scurried past me, still buttoning her blouse, I turned back to James. "I'll sleep in the guest house tonight. We'll talk tomorrow when I'm calmer." James shrugged. "There's not much to talk about. This has been a long time coming." I spent that night in our pool house, alternating between sobbing and staring blankly at the walls. Around midnight, I noticed lights on in the main house and movement as James paced while on the phone. Through the windows, I could see him gesticulating emphatically. He wasn't upset, he was energized, purposeful. Only later would I learn he was speaking with Nathan Broward, his friend and one of the top divorce attorneys in California. The next morning, just like that? 15 years together, and you don't even want to try counseling? "Let's not pretend, Stephanie," he said with a condescending smile. "We've been living separate lives for years. You with your tech obsessions, me with my career. The attraction isn't there anymore. We've grown apart. These things happen." "These things happen?" I repeated incredulously. Finding my husband in bed with his 20-something secretary is not something that just happens, James. He sighed, as if I was being unreasonable. "The affair is a symptom, not the cause." "You want me to leave our home? After you're the one who cheated?" His expression hardened. "The house is in my name, Stephanie. Legally speaking. The locks had been changed. My keycard no longer worked, and James wasn't answering his phone. Through the front windows, I could see him calmly working at his desk, deliberately ignoring my knocking. A security guard, one I'd never seen before, approached me on our front steps. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but Mr. Mitchell has instructed that you're not permitted on the property." Clutching a glass of wine with shaking hands, the full reality of my situation began to sink in. "He's been moving assets for months. I told her. Set a plate of food I couldn't eat in front of me. This was premeditated, Steph. He's been setting this up. You need a shark of a lawyer immediately. What James didn't know, what he couldn't possibly imagine, was that during those years he'd been dismissing my little tech projects. I'd been quietly building a fortune. My initial Bitcoin investment had grown exponentially, and I diversified into other cryptocurrencies and tech startups through anonymous holding structures. I'd been so used to keeping this separate from our marriage that not even our accountant knew the full extent of my personal wealth. As I scrolled through my crypto wallet that night, seeing the current valuation, a strange calm came over me. James thought he was leaving me destitute, dependent on whatever settlement his high-powered legal team would deign to offer. He had no idea who he was really dealing with. Natalie, I said quietly, I need to show you something, but you have to promise absolute secrecy. When I turned my laptop screen to show her the value of just one of my crypto wallets, her eyes widened in shock. Holy shit, Steph. Is that real? I nodded slowly. And that's just one account. For the first time since finding James with Megan, I smiled. A small, determined smile. He has no idea. 3 days after being locked out of my home, I received formal divorce papers from James's attorney. He was filing on grounds of irreconcilable differences, a bland generic term that erased his betrayal from the legal narrative. The document outlined his initial settlement offer. I could keep my personal business, my car, and a generous one-time payment of $200,000. In exchange, I would relinquish all claims to our home, our investment portfolios, our art collection, and our vacation property in Lake Tahoe. The audacity was breathtaking. He was offering me less than 5% of our marital assets, most of which I had contributed to substantially throughout our marriage. On Natalie's recommendation, I scheduled a consultation with Amanda Wilson, a formidable divorce attorney known for handling high-profile Silicon Valley splits. Her office in downtown San Francisco exuded quiet power, understated elegance that conveyed success without flashiness, the opposite of James's ostentatious style. Let me be blunt, Mrs. Mitchell. He's been building toward this for at least a year, probably longer. But we've been married for 15 years, I said. Doesn't that count for something? Amanda gave me a sympathetic but straightforward look. California is a community property state, which theoretically means assets acquired during marriage should be split equally. However, I built my consulting firm entirely on my own expertise and reputation. I believe you, Amanda nodded. But these cases often become he said, she said. And your husband has his entire firm backing his version of events. I see his legal team is working his case pro bono, a professional courtesy that essentially gives him unlimited legal resources. I took a deep breath. What about the infidelity? Doesn't that matter? Unfortunately, California is a no-fault divorce state. His affair with his secretary is irrelevant to the financial settlement. She studied me carefully. I need to understand your complete financial picture to represent you effectively. All assets, including any you might have kept separate from your husband. This was the moment of decision. I could reveal my crypto fortune, which would undoubtedly become part of the divorce proceedings, or I could keep it hidden and appear financially disadvantaged. For now, let's focus on the accounts he knows about, I said carefully. I want to see how far he's willing to go. Amanda raised an eyebrow but nodded. Your strategy. But be aware, if you're concealing assets and it's discovered later, there could be serious consequences. I learned he had told our social circle that I had become unstable and worryingly obsessed with my work, painting himself as the long-suffering husband who had finally reached his breaking point. Former friends took sides, with most gravitating toward James and his convincing narrative of being the reasonable party. The discovery phase of our divorce proceeding was brutal. James's legal team demanded complete documentation of every financial transaction I'd made in the past 5 years. I provided records of my known accounts, my consulting business, my modest personal savings, and the small investment portfolio James had allowed me to manage independently. My crypto holdings remained secure in wallets and offshore structures that existed completely outside the traditional banking system. Our first court appearance set the tone for what was to come. James arrived in an impeccably tailored suit, flanked by 3 attorneys from his firm. He looked confident, almost smug, barely acknowledging my presence. I had chosen to dress conservatively, a simple black dress and minimal jewelry, on Amanda's advice to appear sympathetic to the judge. James's lead attorney, Nathan Broward, presented their case first. James had been the primary breadwinner. His legal career had been the foundation of our financial success, and he had generously supported my hobby business out of affection rather than expectation of meaningful contribution. Amanda methodically presented documentation showing my business had actually generated significant income, roughly equal to James's salary in recent years. She highlighted my contributions to our joint investments and the substantial down payment on our home that had come from my early tech career earnings. Throughout the proceedings, James maintained a composed, almost pitying expression, occasionally shaking his head slightly at my attorney's statements as if they were sadly misguided. Seemed to favor his side from the beginning. His questions to my attorney were more challenging, his tone more skeptical. During a particularly difficult cross-examination about my business finances, I deliberately allowed my voice to crack and my hands to tremble, a calculated display of vulnerability that contrasted with James's cold composure. "Your Honor," I said, looking directly at the judge, "I'm simply asking for a fair division of the assets we built together over 15 years. I don't understand why I'm being treated as if I contributed nothing to our marriage." For a brief moment I saw doubt cross the judge's face. James, noticing this too, frowned slightly. The preliminary rulings went heavily in James's favor. The judge granted him exclusive use of our home during proceedings. After this initial defeat, I met with Amanda in her office, ostensibly devastated. "He's going to take everything," I said once her door was closed. "It's not over," she assured me. "This is just the first round. We can appeal, request a different judge, bring in expert witnesses to value your business contributions properly." I looked up at her, my expression changing from defeated to determined. "Actually, I think it's time to change our strategy. There's something I haven't told you about my financial situation. I arranged to meet my crypto team at a private office in Oakland, far from the financial district where James and his colleagues operated. The nondescript building housed several tech startups, providing perfect cover for our gathering. Ryan Kelly, my financial advisor specializing in cryptocurrency investments, had flown in from New York specifically for this meeting. Joining us were Michaela Dern, my offshore structuring specialist, and Amanda Wilson, my divorce attorney, who was still adjusting to the revelation about my true financial status. "Let me get this straight," Amanda said, looking at the secure laptop screen displaying my portfolio dashboard. "You invested $10,000 in Bitcoin in 2010? "Initially, yes," I confirmed. "Then I added more during various dips. Another $50,000 from my inheritance in 2011 when prices dropped temporarily, $100,000 from my consulting profits in 2013, and larger amounts as my business grew successful." Ryan took over the explanation, clicking through various screens showing diversified holdings across multiple cryptocurrencies and blockchain projects. "Stephanie didn't just buy and hold," he explained. "She strategically diversified and reinvested gains. She was also an early investor in Ethereum and several other successful blockchain projects. But most importantly, she understood the technology fundamentally because of her computer science background. She made educated investments when most people still thought crypto was a scam or a fad." Amanda stared at the bottom line figure on the screen, $3.2 billion. "And your husband has no knowledge of any of this?" she asked incredulously. I shook my head. James always dismissed cryptocurrency as a passing fad, internet play money. He was focused on traditional investments, real estate, stocks, art. His condescension actually worked in my favor. He never bothered to look into what I was doing with my little tech projects, as he called them. Michaela, a sharp-featured woman with a Swiss accent, pulled up another set of documents. "We established a multi-jurisdictional structure for Stephanie back in 2017, when her holdings first exceeded $100 million. A foundation in Liechtenstein owns a series of companies in Singapore. You should have disclosed these assets at the beginning of the proceedings. By withholding this information, We could face serious complications if we reveal everything now. Ryan leaned forward. That's why we're not suggesting full disclosure. We've developed a strategic approach. I nodded, taking control of the laptop to display our plan. We'll reveal a portion of my assets, enough to completely change the power dynamic without exposing the full extent of my wealth. We can disclose one of my smaller investment vehicles worth approximately $50 million, suggesting it was a lucky early investment that recently appreciated. This will accomplish several things. Michaela continued. It will shock James and his legal team, undermine their narrative of Stephanie as financially dependent on him, and force a reassessment of the entire case, all without revealing her true position as a billionaire. Amanda looked thoughtful. It could work. The penalty for not disclosing the $50 million initially would be manageable. We could claim you weren't fully aware of the appreciation until recently. But we'd need to be careful about the timing and presentation. I want to see his face, I said quietly. When he realizes he doesn't have all the power. When he understands he hasn't broken me. The next 2 weeks were spent carefully preparing documentation that would reveal exactly what we wanted, while protecting the broader truth. We selected a specific investment vehicle, a Singapore-based company that had invested in a blockchain security project, which had legitimately appreciated to $47 million. I also underwent a subtle transformation. Gone was the soft-spoken conservative dresser trying to appear sympathetic to the judge. I purchased a new wardrobe, elegant. Something inside me had shifted. I was no longer playing the role of victim in James's narrative. The day before our next court appearance, I received a text from James, the first direct communication since he changed the locks on our home. My attorney says you've requested a special hearing. Dragging this out won't change the outcome. Stephanie, be reasonable and accept the settlement offer before you waste what little you have left on legal fees. I didn't respond, but I slept better that night than I had in months. The next morning, I arrived at the courthouse in a Bentley. A recent purchase I decided not to delay any longer. Amanda Wilson at my side carrying a leather portfolio containing the documentation that would change everything. When I entered the courtroom, James did a double take, trying to understand what had changed. Judge Harmon called the special hearing to order. I understand the respondent has new financial information to present to the court. Ms. Wilson, you may proceed. Amanda approached the bench with our prepared documents. Your Honor, my client recently became aware of a significant appreciation in value of an early tech investment made with her separate property. We're submitting an amended financial disclosure, reflecting this change in circumstances. As copies were provided to James's legal team, I watched his face carefully. Initial confusion gave way to disbelief as he scanned the numbers. His attorney Nathan Broward flipped through the pages with increasing agitation, whispering urgently to his colleagues. Your Honor, Broward finally said, standing abruptly, we need time to review and verify these new claims. This is the first we're hearing of any such investment. Judge Harmon reviewed the documents, his eyebrows rising. This appears to be a blockchain security company based in Singapore valued at $47 million? Ms. Mitchell, can you explain why this wasn't included in your initial disclosures? I stood, making direct eye contact with the judge. Your Honor, I made this investment years ago using a small portion of my inheritance, which was always maintained as separate property. The company was recently acquired by a major tech firm, resulting in this unexpected valuation. My financial advisors only confirmed the final figures last week. James stood up, unable to contain himself. She's lying. You'll have an opportunity to respond through your counsel. For the next hour, the hearing devolved into technical discussions as James's team tried desperately to discredit the documentation. They demanded full access to all related accounts, questioned the legitimacy of the Singapore company, and even suggested I might have fabricated the documents. Given this significant change in financial circumstances, we moved that all previous temporary orders regarding asset freezes be reconsidered. Clearly, the court was operating under a misapprehension about my client's financial situation. Judge Harmon, who had previously favored James in nearly every ruling, now looked at me with new interest. When James returned, his confident demeanor had vanished. He kept looking at me as if seeing a stranger, his expression alternating between confusion and anger. As the hearing concluded with the judge ordering a complete reassessment of the case, I walked past James on my way out. He grabbed my arm, whispering harshly, "What game are you playing? Where did this money really come from?" I removed his hand calmly but firmly. "You should have paid more attention to my little tech projects, James. This is just the beginning." The look of uncertainty on his face as I walked away was worth every second of the humiliation he had put me through. 2 weeks after revealing my $47 million surprise asset, we reconvened for what would become a pivotal hearing in our divorce proceedings. I had continued my personal transformation, arriving in a white Carolina Herrera dress that projected both confidence and purity, a deliberate choice to contrast with James's increasingly disheveled appearance. The stress was clearly taking its toll on him. He had lost weight, his normally perfect hair showed signs of neglect, and he kept whispering frantically to his attorneys throughout the pre-hearing preparations. His once intimidating legal team seemed less cohesive, with visible disagreements breaking out among them as they shuffled papers and exchanged tense glances. "All rise for the Honorable Judge William Harmon," the bailiff announced as the judge entered the courtroom. After the initial formalities, Amanda Wilson stood to address the court. "Your Honor, since our last appearance, our forensic accountants have uncovered several concerning transactions in accounts controlled solely by Mr. Mitchell that we believe constitute dissipation of marital assets. Examining the documents, Mr. Broward, was your client planning to disclose this account?" Nathan Broward, James's lead attorney, appeared genuinely surprised. "Your Honor, I need to confer with my client about this specific account. We were not aware." "You weren't aware because he didn't tell you," Amanda interjected smoothly. "Just as he's likely concealing other assets. We've also discovered evidence that Mr. Mitchell has been planning this divorce for over a year, while continuing to convince my client to transfer joint assets into his name alone." She presented another document, printouts of emails between James and Nathan Broward dating back 14 months, discussing strategies for minimizing spousal claims in the event of relationship dissolution. I watched James's face pale as these messages were read aloud. "Furthermore," Amanda continued, "we have evidence that Mr. Mitchell's relationship with his secretary Megan Davis predates the discovery of their affair by approximately 2 years. These credit card statements show Mr. Mitchell purchased jewelry from Tiffany & Company and weekend getaways to Cabo San Lucas for Ms. Davis, using marital funds, while still presenting himself as committed to the marriage." James suddenly stood up, his composure finally breaking. "This is character assassination. My personal relationships have nothing to do with the financial aspects of this divorce." Judge Harmon's gavel came down hard. "Mr. Mitchell, control yourself or I will hold you in contempt. Whether or not your extramarital activities are relevant to the division of assets remains to be seen, but your use of marital funds to finance these activities certainly is." James slumped back into his seat, loosening his tie as if it were suffocating him. His attorney placed a restraining hand on his arm, whispering urgently in his ear. The judge turned his attention back to me. "Ms. Mitchell, your legal team has presented evidence of a substantial separate asset, which you claim was unknown to your husband." James always dismissed cryptocurrency and blockchain technology as, in his words, internet play money and a passing fad. He was focused on traditional investments and actively discouraged my interest in emerging technologies. This particular investment was made with my inheritance money, which was always maintained separately from our marital assets, on his insistence. James scoffed audibly, earning another warning glance from the judge. "Your Honor," Amanda added, "we have contemporaneous emails from Mr. These communications directly support Ms. Mitchell's claim that he wanted no involvement with these investments." The dynamic in the courtroom had completely shifted. Judge Harmon, who had previously seemed to favor James, now directed increasingly skeptical questions toward him and his legal team. "The narrative of James as the reasonable," he said in a low voice, "this has gotten out of hand. We had 15 good years together. Let's not destroy each other like this. I'm willing to be more generous in the settlement. You can keep the Tahoe house and I'll increase the cash payment to $1 million. I looked at him with genuine amusement. You still don't get it. But by methodically planning to leave me financially devastated while pretending to love me. That's not true, he protested, but his eyes shifted away as he spoke. Your emails to Nathan from 14 months ago say otherwise, I replied calmly. You've been planning this for over a year, moving assets, building your case against me. Where did that money really come from, Stephanie? Are you involved with someone? Is that it? Amanda quickly intervened, removing his hand from my arm. Mr. Mitchell, do not touch my client again. Save your questions for the deposition. When the hearing resumed, Judge Harmon had clearly reassessed the case. Based on the evidence presented today, I'm issuing several new temporary orders. The freeze on joint accounts is lifted. Mrs. Mitchell will have access to all marital properties, including the primary residence. Mr. Given the evidence of potential dissipation of marital assets, Mr. Mitchell is ordered to provide a full accounting of all transfers exceeding $10,000 made in the past 24 months, including complete documentation of the Cayman Islands account mentioned today. As we left the courtroom, local legal reporter Diane Fujimoto approached us, microphone in hand. Mrs. Mitchell. Sources say this divorce has taken an unexpected turn with the revelation of previously unknown assets. Can you comment on how this might affect the proceedings? Before I could respond, Amanda smoothly interjected. My client has always operated with complete transparency and integrity, despite experiencing profound betrayal. Today's hearing simply began the process of uncovering the truth. We have no further comment at this time. The next day, our divorce made the front page of the San Francisco Chronicle's business section. Tech consultants' hidden millions shift power in high-profile divorce. The article detailed James's alleged asset concealment and mentioned the surprising cryptocurrency windfall that had changed the case's trajectory. Over the following weeks, James's carefully constructed world began to unravel. His law firm placed him on administrative leave pending an investigation into his use of firm resources for personal matters. Specifically, having junior associates research his divorce strategy on company time. Megan, his secretary-turned-girlfriend, ended their relationship after the details of his financial maneuvers became public, reportedly telling colleagues she didn't sign up for this level of scandal. Most satisfyingly, the judge ordered James to vacate our Pacific Heights home, allowing me to return to the space he had so cruelly locked me out of months earlier. As I walked through the front door for the first time since finding him with Megan, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Vindication tinged with sadness for the 15 years I had invested in a relationship with someone who had been planning my devastation. That evening, as I sat in my living room, I received a text from James. This isn't over. I know there's more you're not showing. No one gets that lucky with one investment. What are you hiding, Stephanie? I didn't respond, but I smiled at his desperate attempt to regain control of a situation that had slipped completely from his grasp. He was right about one thing: this wasn't over. But for the first time since our marriage imploded, I was the one determining what happened next. 6 months after James had confidently filed for divorce, expecting to leave me with nearly nothing, we gathered for what would be our final court hearing. The intervening months had been a methodical dismantling of the case he had built against me, as my legal team systematically exposed his financial manipulations and the calculated nature of his betrayal. The courtroom was more crowded than usual. I had chosen my outfit carefully for this final appearance. A navy blue Chanel suit that projected confidence without ostentation. James, by contrast, looked diminished in a suit that seemed slightly too large for his frame. The stress of the proceedings had visibly affected him. He had lost weight, and gray had appeared at his temples that hadn't been there 6 months earlier. Judge Harmon entered the courtroom, and the proceedings began with a summary of the case's developments since our initial filing. The court-appointed forensic accountant presented his findings, confirming what my team had already uncovered. James had been systematically moving assets for over a year before filing for divorce, establishing hidden accounts, and deliberately misleading both me and initially his own legal team about the full extent of our marital holdings. Your Honor, the accountant testified, My investigation revealed approximately $3.7 million in marital assets transferred to accounts not disclosed in Mr. Mitchell's initial filings. Additionally, there appears to be a pattern of deliberately undervaluing certain real estate investments and art pieces acquired during the marriage. James stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched. His legal representation had changed. Nathan Broward was no longer leading his team, replaced by a more conservative attorney from a different firm. The change suggested that James's former colleagues had distanced themselves from his increasingly problematic case. When it was time for final arguments, Amanda Wilson delivered a measured, devastating summary of James's actions throughout our marriage and divorce proceedings. Your Honor, this case began as a seemingly straightforward divorce filing but revealed itself to be something far more calculated. Mr. Mitchell, a corporate attorney familiar with financial structures, spent over a year preparing to leave his wife financially vulnerable while maintaining the appearance of a committed husband. He transferred joint assets to hidden accounts, convinced Ms. Mitchell to place properties in his name alone, and deliberately undervalued their marital estate. She paused, allowing the court to absorb her words. What Mr. Mitchell failed to anticipate was that the wife he had dismissed and underestimated had built significant value through her own separate investments he had repeatedly mocked and discouraged, suggesting that any financial maneuvering on James's part had been standard estate planning rather than divorce preparation, and that the division of assets should still favor James given his greater contribution to the accumulation of marital wealth. The argument fell flat, contradicted by the mountain of evidence we had assembled. When Judge Harmon delivered his final ruling, the outcome was more decisive than even I had anticipated. Having reviewed all evidence and testimony in this matter, the court finds that Mr. Mitchell engaged in deliberate concealment and dissipation of marital assets in anticipation of divorce proceedings. This behavior constitutes financial misconduct and warrants remedial measures in the distribution of property. He outlined his decision. I would retain our Pacific Heights home, the vacation property in Lake Tahoe, and 70% of our joint investment accounts. James would keep his personal retirement accounts and a smaller investment portfolio worth approximately $1.2 million. Most significantly, my $47 million separate investment would remain entirely mine, with no claim from James. Additionally, the judge continued, given Mr. Mitchell's demonstrated pattern of deception, the court orders him to pay Mrs. Mitchell's legal fees in full, amounting to $385,000. I maintained a composed expression, but inside I felt a surge of vindication. Across the courtroom, James appeared stunned, whispering urgently to his attorney who simply shook his head in response. As the judge concluded the proceedings, James's attorney immediately announced their intention to appeal the ruling. Judge Harmon acknowledged the declaration but noted, "The court finds the evidence in this case particularly compelling, Mr. Dalton. I suggest you consider carefully before pursuing what may be a costly and ultimately unsuccessful appeal." Outside the courthouse, several reporters had gathered, alerted to the high-profile conclusion of our case. I declined to comment directly, allowing Amanda to deliver a brief statement emphasizing that justice had been served, and that I was looking forward to moving on with my life. As we walked toward our waiting car, I noticed James standing alone on the courthouse steps, his attorney having already departed. For a moment, our eyes met across the plaza. There was no triumph in my gaze, only a quiet acknowledgement that what we had once shared was truly, finally over. That evening, alone in the house that was now legally mine again, I received an email from James, his first direct communication in months that wasn't filtered through attorneys. "Stephanie, I underestimated you. I always did. I see that now. This outcome isn't what I expected, but perhaps it's what I deserved. Part of me still can't believe that investment of yours was legitimate. If you have a moment, there's nothing more to discuss. I wish you well in New York. Please direct any remaining matters through our attorneys. Stephanie." 2 weeks later, I learned that his appeal had been denied. The final divorce decree arrived by courier, 15 years of marriage dissolved in a 30-page legal document. I signed where indicated and returned it without ceremony. That night, I opened a bottle of champagne I had been saving for a special occasion, and took it out to the terrace overlooking the San Francisco Bay. As I watched the lights of the city twinkle below, I made a call I had been postponing until everything was truly final. "Ryan, it's Stephanie. The divorce is officially completed. I think it's time we discuss what to do with the rest of my portfolio." The following week, I met with my complete financial team to discuss accessing and diversifying my full crypto holdings, now worth approximately $3.2 billion. My name appeared for the first time. Stephanie Mitchell, $3.8 billion source, cryptocurrency investments and tech ventures. The feature included a professional photograph of me, standing in front of the San Francisco offices of Mitchell Innovations, the venture capital firm I had established focusing on women-led tech startups. The day the list was published, I received another email from James, just a forwarded link to the Forbes article with a single line of text. "Was all of this real the whole time we were married?" I didn't respond. Some questions don't deserve answers. 1 year after my divorce from James was finalized, I stood on the balcony of my new Malibu beach house. The past 12 months had been transformative in ways I couldn't have imagined when I first found James with Megan in our bed. What had begun as the most painful experience of my life had ultimately led to a profound rebirth, not just financially, but emotionally and spiritually as well. After keeping my crypto billions hidden for years, first from James and then from the courts, I had finally embraced my wealth publicly. Mitchell Innovations, my venture capital firm focusing exclusively on women-led tech startups, had already funded 27 promising companies in its first year of operation. Our portfolio included everything from blockchain security solutions to AI-driven healthcare platforms, all led by brilliant women who might otherwise have struggled to secure traditional funding. My personal transformation had been equally significant. I had purchased this Malibu property as a weekend retreat, maintaining my primary residence in San Francisco, but adding a Manhattan penthouse to accommodate my increasingly bi-coastal life. These weren't just extravagant purchases but statements of independence, spaces that were entirely mine, chosen without compromise or consideration of anyone else's preferences. While my experience with James hadn't included physical violence, I had come to recognize the pattern of financial control and manipulation that characterized our marriage as a form of abuse, one that left no visible bruises but created lasting damage nonetheless. The Autonomy Foundation provided both emergency financial assistance and long-term educational resources, helping survivors establish credit, understand investment basics, and build careers that would ensure their ongoing independence. Working with these brave individuals had become the most fulfilling aspect of my new life, transforming my personal pain into purpose. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael, the pediatric surgeon I had been dating for the past 4 months. We had met at a hospital fundraiser where my foundation was a major donor, and unlike the wealth-focused social circles James had insisted we maintain, Michael had been refreshingly uninterested in material status. In fact, he hadn't known about my billionaire status until our third date, when a waiter had recognized me from the Forbes coverage. "Morning, Steph. Hope Malibu is beautiful today. Looking forward to dinner tomorrow. Just normal hospital craziness here in SF. Miss you." I smiled, appreciating his straightforward communication, so different from James's calculated charm. Our relationship was still new, but it felt honest in a way my marriage never had. Michael respected my success without feeling threatened by it, and I found myself appreciating his dedication to his young patients more than I would have appreciated any display of wealth or status. As I sipped my coffee, I reflected on the lessons of the past 2 years, insights I wished I could share with my younger self, and that I now tried to impart to the women seeking help through my foundation. I had maintained separate assets but still allowed James to dominate our financial narrative, accepting his dismissal of my investment interests and deferring to his supposed expertise. Never again would I surrender my financial agency to anyone, regardless of their credentials or confidence. I had also learned that revenge, while temporarily satisfying, was ultimately empty compared to genuine growth. In those early days after discovering James's betrayal, I had fantasized about using my hidden billions to destroy him. The reality had been more nuanced and ultimately more satisfying. I hadn't needed to actively harm him. I had simply needed to stand in my truth and allow the consequences of his own actions to unfold. Perhaps most importantly, I had discovered that losing everything, or believing I had forced me to recognize what truly mattered. The social standing James had prized so highly had proven fickle. With many of our supposed friends disappearing when the divorce turned messy, the material possessions I had once treasured now seemed like mere objects rather than markers of success. What remained valuable were my resilience, my creativity, my capacity for growth, and the authentic connections I was now forming. My assistant Clara called as I was heading inside, reminding me about the CNN interview scheduled for that afternoon. The business network was doing a feature on women in venture capital, and I had agreed to participate, seeing it as an opportunity to elevate other female investors, rather than just telling my own story. Also, Clara added, "You received an email from James Mitchell. His firm's handling some merger that involves one of your portfolio companies. He's requesting a meeting." I paused, considering how different this moment felt from a year ago, when any communication from James would have triggered an emotional storm. Now I felt nothing beyond mild curiosity. "Tell him my team will handle it," I replied. "He can coordinate with our legal department." After ending the call, I opened my laptop to review my notes for the upcoming interview. The talking points focused on the $200 million fund Mitchell Innovations had recently launched specifically for women-led blockchain and cryptocurrency ventures. An investment thesis James had once mockingly called my internet play money obsession. The irony wasn't lost on me, but it no longer carried emotional weight. That chapter of my life was closed, its lessons integrated into the woman I had become. Later that evening, following the CNN interview, I hosted a small dinner at my Malibu home for 5 women entrepreneurs from our portfolio companies. As we sat around the table sharing stories, strategies, and support, I felt a deep sense of contentment that had nothing to do with the breathtaking ocean view or the expensive wine we were enjoying. "To financial independence," I said, raising my glass in a toast, "and to trusting ourselves above all others." The women, brilliant, determined innovators who reminded me of my younger self, raised their glasses in return. "Stephanie," said Ava, whose cybersecurity startup had recently secured its Series B funding, "I have to ask, when you realized what your ex-husband was doing, trying to leave you with nothing, weren't you terrified? Only to discover they've been planning your financial destruction. It shakes your foundation." But what I eventually realized was that losing everything, or believing I had, forced me to recognize what couldn't be taken away. My knowledge, my resilience, my capacity to rebuild. I looked around at these women who were changing their industries and creating new possibilities. The greatest investment I ever made wasn't in Bitcoin in 2010, though that certainly worked out well, I smiled. It was in myself, in believing that my judgment, my insights, and my vision had value, even when the person closest to me dismissed them. Believing I had lost everything that mattered. Today I had more than I had ever dreamed possible, not just in financial terms but in purpose, freedom, and authentic connection. James had indeed taken everything in our divorce, everything except what truly mattered. And in losing what I thought I needed, I had found what I actually deserved. Remember that your greatest asset is always yourself. Your mind, your heart, your determination. No one can take that from you unless you let them. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more true stories of transformation and triumph. Share this with someone who might need a reminder of their own strength today. Thank you for being part of this journey with me, and remember, sometimes what looks like an ending is actually the most beautiful beginning.